Before I start, I'd just like to thank everyone on behalf of CND for attending today. We've been hugely encouraged by the response to today in advance and the feedback we've received from you all today. So thank you all for coming, and I'm sure you all agree it's been a truly fascinating day, and we'll all be leaving shortly much better informed about these issues. A lot of the issues we have talked about today has looked at the dangers ahead, what conflict will look like, what new weapons will look like. And I think now in this closing session, we're getting more to the nub of the flip of that question, what security will look like, what security should look like. And with that, I think I in particular mean genuine security, not security or a concept of security that simply serves to flatter ego and perhaps maintain the illusions of influence that we once may have had. So speaking to you as a representative of CND, you won't be too surprised to hear that I think a future that means a secure future is a future without nuclear weapons. And if we just looked at the government's national security strategy, then we find that they actually agree with us. Because if you look at the government's strategy and their assessment of the threats we face today, nuclear attack is not in their tier 1 threat at all. Instead, they quite sensibly list pandemics, they list climate change, they list terrorism, they list cyber attacks, but this quite accurate analysis is not reflected in their rhetoric, where they continuously tell us we need nuclear weapons to keep us safe. Now, a lot of you today have said you've heard a lot of scary scenarios and maybe we've reached our fill, but I'm just going to quickly run through a few more to grow in there from the front. But I think it's important to highlight the actual dangers facing us today. And I think we'll all agree there's a clear consensus that climate change is the biggest danger facing us right now. Even senior military figures have formally warned that global warming is the greatest security threat of the 21st century. Climate-related disasters, things like droughts, mass migration, rising sea levels, these are all huge and complex problems we are yet to truly get to grip with. And then there's international terrorism, which for some reason is perhaps more high profile than climate change in some ways. We all hear about terrorist attacks and it frightens us, but are we truly getting to grips with the causes of terrorism? I would argue not. And there's also the possibility of cyber attacks. The UK is facing an increasing threat of cyber attacks from hostile states, hostile bodies, even hostile organisations. And it is, of course, self-evident that spending £205 billion trying to deal on a new nuclear weapon system will do nothing to deal with that cyber attack, with that terrorist attack, with climate change. And in fact, in the last couple of years, experts have even increasingly questioned the viability of that very system we're planning on spending billions on. Developments in underwater drone technology could render that system obsolete. The vast amounts of money being spent on underwater drones could mean that huge swarms of these drones could find submarines easier, making them far more detectable, and therefore we're building weapons with built-in redundancy. Former Defence Secretary Des Brown warned us of another potentially huge problem in 2015 when he warned that tridents could be rendered obsolete by cyber attacks. He went on to say that unless weak spots were protected, there's no guarantee of a reliable nuclear weapon system. This is a former Defence Secretary, someone who you would imagine would know a bit about this. Now, the worst case scenario is a hostile cyber takeover of our nuclear weapon system. So this could succeed if an adversary managed to install a malware program in the building phase that could be activated at a later date. Another scary scenario is the possibility of another state or organisation hacking into the communication system, so causing confusion on board about whether a nuclear attack is imminent. Now, all these problems do not stop supporters of Trident claiming that actually Trident, rather than making us less safe, keeps the peace. Of course, this is the false premise of deterrence. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union may have avoided a direct war, but that didn't prevent their involvement in wars in Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. Yeah. The nuclear powers have been involved in hundreds of wars since the atomic bomb was first invented. And having nuclear weapons does not prevent you from 9/11 or from the July the 7th attacks, the real attacks that we have faced in recent years. In fact, replacing Trident, and therefore buying a new nuclear weapons system, might encourage more countries to get nuclear weapons, and so increase the danger of nuclear war. If we insist that we need these weapons for our security, what kind of message does this send to other countries? Why would they not need them if we do? It is, of course, the government's priority to keep its citizens safe. But true security in the 21st century is a complex notion and won't be solved overnight. Britain does have the capabilities and resources to do this, but that won't happen if we're diverted instead and are spending our money, our defence priorities, on building new nuclear weapons. Disarmament could not only provide political leadership to the rest of the nuclear-armed states, but could actually be a practical guide on how to do it. We could write a blueprint for the rest of the world. Britain disarming would mean that they could sign the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of nuclear weapons. This treaty could enter into force in 2019 and will make it illegal for its signatories to possess or use nuclear weapons. This treaty is supported by a majority of the world's countries, rather than the 9 who possess nuclear weapons. This would be the first step in Britain rethinking its approach to security, with discussions on our membership of NATO and our involvement in foreign wars to follow. We should also re-evaluate our relationship with the United States. Since his election in 2016, Trump has brought into sharp focus the very dangerous aspects of Britain's relationship with Washington. For 60 years, we have been tied into a special nuclear relationship with the US through the US-UK Mutual Defence Agreement, the world's most extensive nuclear sharing agreement. It is now more urgent than ever for the government to end this relationship, because at the moment, our maintenance of it is giving active support to Trump and his warmongering policies. It is striking how many of today's security threats that I mentioned a little bit earlier are actually non-military, suggesting that security should be rethought in a new way. We have to find collective ways, internationally, to resolve these problems, or we won't have a world left to fight over. This weekend is the centenary commemoration of the end of the First World War. 100 years ago, the world's first global industrialised war was drawing to a close. The terrible suffering of the last 4 years was becoming apparent, and it was described at the time as the war to end all wars, a belief that perhaps humanity had learned from its lesson. Of course, this hasn't happened, and we could even say that we're living in more dangerous times today, partly because of the creation of nuclear weapons. What we should do as a society is to use this centenary commemoration as an opportunity to reflect on the horrors of conflict and on the possibility that a future war could be even worse. A future war could be nuclear. If we realise this as a society, if politicians realise this, if the defence industry realise this, then perhaps this could be a step towards achieving true security. Thank you, everyone.